I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
It's America's shameful prohibition on the front page of normal.org. Life sentences for marijuana. And you'll recall, if you've listened to Normal Show Live for any length of time, you've heard our spot on John Walters, who was the drug czar under George W. Bush, who famously said that finding a nonviolent marijuana prisoner in jail or prison for marijuana is like finding a unicorn. It doesn't exist. Well, this is something we're going to talk about here, and it's brought to light by the recent case of the man Cornell Hood II, the 35-year-old father of a young child who was sentenced in Louisiana on Thursday for life in prison for a cannabis possession case. And this was triggered by the state's 3 strikes and you're out mandatory minimum thing. Now, the south of the United States has more of this. This is where we find these long, insanely long prison sentences. And I wanted to give you a look at a place on the web called the Sentencing Project. You can find them at sentencingproject.org. And that's where you'll find this interactive map that shows you the United States of America. And you can just hover over any of the states there. And on the side, it will give you the information on the total people that are incarcerated in jail, the probation, parole, the black-white ratio, Hispanic-white ratio, number of juveniles, state corrections expenditures, felony disenfranchisement. So if we hover over here on where we can see the southern United States, we hover over a place like Florida, and we find that 18.8% of the African-American eligible voting population is disenfranchised in Florida because of felonies. We find in the state of Alabama, state corrections expenditures are $577 million every year, and the black-white ratio 3.5 to 1. We go over to Georgia, we can get more information. You can find this again at sentencingproject.org. You'll be able to find out their interactive map to get that prison data. It's just despicable when you find out all of this information in one place, and it just gets your blood boiling like I've got it now. And this continues on the normal front page with the identification of a new website called lifeforpot.com. And I must give credit and thanks for this to Kellen Russiniello of the George Washington Law School. He's an intern for Normal, one of our legal interns in Washington, D.C. And I read from his text here. To many of us, the idea of anyone spending life in prison for a nonviolent marijuana offense is absolutely ludicrous. Yet with the recent passage of a bill in the Oklahoma State Legislature making the manufacture of hash punishable by life in prison, it is clear that life sentences for nonviolent marijuana offenders do exist. In fact, a new website is drawing attention to this issue and has identified several people who are currently serving life sentences for nonviolent marijuana offenses. Lifeforpot.com focuses on finding individuals who have been sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for federal, nonviolent, marijuana-only offenses. Beth Curtis, the founder of the website, has identified 8 people, each with a unique background and story of how they came to spend the rest of their lives in prison for nonviolent marijuana offenses. Beth is very familiar with the subject. The first individual listed is John Knock, her brother. Since 2000, John has been serving 2 life sentences plus 20 years for his connection to a conspiracy to import multiple tons of marijuana and hashish from Pakistan and Lebanon into the United States and Canada, a sentence that Beth believes is the harshest ever for nonviolent marijuana crimes. When she talked to others about the severity of her brother's sentence, she realized that people believed that nonviolent marijuana offenders could not receive such draconian sentences. Despite having retired and living in Hawaii when law enforcement came knocking on John's door, he was extradited to Florida, a state that he'd never lived in or committed a crime in. Instead, John was drawn into a sting operation because of his contacts with the San Francisco area smuggler who had been indicted. However, John was never seen by law enforcement committing any of the crimes he was convicted of. He was never found in possession of any marijuana, and his prosecution rested only upon the testimony of informants. Criminal defense lawyers describe this as a dry case, and the full story is available at johnknock.com. That's K-N-O-C-K, like knocking on a door. johnknock.com and grandmasmind.com. Grandma's Mind. But how extraordinary is this sentence? Life for Pot lists some of the most famous drug kingpins and the sentences that they received, and it seems that John's sentence was given special treatment. For example, Freeway Ricky Ross, the preeminent crack dealer of the Los Angeles area during the 1980s and early 90s, was sentenced to life in 1996. His sentence was subsequently reduced to 20 years, and he was released in 2009. Manuel Felipe Salazar Espinosa, deemed by the DEA to be one of the world's most significant drug kingpins, making up to $14 million a week, was given 30 years for conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States and money laundering. It is clear that there are differences in the sentencing of these individuals. Life for Pot seeks to identify and make others aware of these discrepancies. Beth notes that the creation of mandatory minimum sentences at the federal level has resulted in the increase in power of the prosecutor to decide the sentence by choosing which charges to pursue. She specifically points out that the 11th Circuit, which encompasses Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, has given 6 of the 8 life sentences identified for nonviolent marijuana-only offenses. So where does this effort go from here? Although Beth has already received some feedback from politicians, attorneys, activists, and journalists, she hopes to start an organization focused on this issue soon. In order to do this, she explains that she will need advisors to help out, as well as a strong coalition. The roots of this coalition have already begun to take hold, with organizations like the November Coalition, Drug Policy Alliance, and Families Against Mandatory Minimums providing support, as well as media attention from a Columbia, Missouri NPR affiliate and High Times magazine. Beth would also like to broaden the focus by including those serving de facto life sentences for nonviolent marijuana-only offenses, including where older individuals are sentenced to long sentences. For example, a 50-year-old sentenced to 20 years. State sentences are another area where Beth would like to examine. Sentence reform efforts can be very successful at the state level. In order to do this, however, more resources must be available. A group petition for clemency is also in the works for those prisoners that have been identified as part of this effort. Quote, "The solution is political," Beth declared. "Legislative action is the best way to address the problem of egregious sentencing disparities. An organization focused on this issue would therefore be heavily focused on reaching legislators. So far, Life for Pot has sent out several cards and letters to federal congressmen and agencies." Beth also noted that advocacy efforts for the legalization of marijuana at the national level must be bolstered. In these times where some jurisdictions are locking up nonviolent marijuana offenders for life, it is good to hear that someone is bringing the inconsistency and irrationality of these practices to light. If you know someone that is currently serving a federal life sentence without parole for a nonviolent marijuana-only offense, or would be able to assist Beth in her efforts, please contact her at johnknock@johnknock.com. And this is on the front page of the normal.org right now. You can go there and learn more about this. And of course, with that recent case of the man sentenced for life on his 4th marijuana conviction, because of this 3 strikes law, it just reminds us of how ridiculous, insane, tragic, cruel, unjust this marijuana prohibition is. And it's even worse than that. We're among the 15 countries that have the death penalty for marijuana. It's never been issued, it's never been used, but you can look it up on the normal.org front page. Go to the select a state and pick federal. You'll find we have a federal death penalty for marijuana. It's a kingpin statute. If you're convicted of making more than, I think it's $25 million a year, or if you're caught with more than 60,000 kilograms or 60,000 plants, then you can get the death sentence for marijuana in the United States of America, just like you can in Singapore and Malaysia and Saudi Arabia and some of these other great beacons of democracy. This is not the land of the free that my grandfather fought World War II for. This is not the land of the free that my uncles fought in Vietnam for. And it's not the land of the free that your sons and brothers and husbands are fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places around the world for. This is not what America is all about. This country was founded by hemp farmers who are rolling in their graves at the notion that we are putting citizens in a cage for cultivating a plant, for treating themselves with a safe, effective medicine, or for just hanging out on a Friday night and smoking a doob on their porch. This is ridiculous. It's got to end now. And I'm beginning to run out of patience of half-stepping measures of decriminalization of low priorities and medical marijuana and affirmative defenses. It's time to just recognize the human right to use the plants that come out of the ground. How much more natural and obvious and inalienable could a right be than to use what God, nature, the creator, evolution, whatever you want to call it, brings forth from the very earth that we walk on. It's time to legalize marijuana. It's time to band together to do it. I don't care if you're for hemp, for medical, for legalization, what have you, sentencing disparities, whatever. It's time to band together as one and do the most honest and effective thing we can do and legalize marijuana. From that, all other reforms will flow. Thanks so much for joining us here for Hour 1 of Normal Show Live. For Cannabis Gary, Ganja John, and Kalika the Intern, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is Normal Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.